Hi, my name is Bill Mooney McCoy. I'm the director of Safe Families, which is a program of Tech Mission in Boston. Safe Families focuses on protecting children in at-risk communities from pornography and other dangers on the internet by providing training and educational materials for parents, churches, and community organizations. We also seek to empower urban pastors and other leaders and individuals by providing help for adults and teens who are struggling with pornography and other media addictions. I don't really know when it kind of started or even why it happened. I grew up in a wonderful Christian home with a real powerful sense of who Jesus was, and I accepted Christ at an early age. I was very serious about my relationship with God, and in just about every area of my life I did all I could to do the right thing and to do what I felt was right in His eyes. But for some reason the issue of pornography and sexual material just was a real snare for me. Through high school and on into college, so that by the time I got to college, at one point I decided, well, pornography is okay. This wasn't because I had a moral revelation or anything. It was because I got tired of having to admit that I was wrong and confess. I just got tired of it. I call that morality creep. Later, as I moved into adulthood, I anticipated marriage, and I thought marriage was going to solve it. I thought that would eliminate the problem. Well, I can testify that any sexual problem one has before marriage, you will have after marriage, only it will be worse because it will involve other people. I continued to drift downward and eventually reached a place where I stopped taking communion because I got so tired of knowing that I was going to sin as soon as a day or two had passed. And I moved deeply into despair, wondering and not knowing how to get out of it. Now, I've kept a journal since I was 19, and I recently came across this entry. I have the whole documentation of my descent into this. I call them postcards from hell. And this particular entry went something like this. This is heavy. Something unnatural and way beyond my control is driving me on a futile search for more and more. I love you, Lord. No other sin do I routinely commit in deliberate, premeditated fashion. Not wanting to hurt you, but unable to stop. Today, the entire day was spent masturbating, fantasizing, looking at porn. Why? It's wild that the good boy, the one who has never stolen, played hooky, cheated, lied, almost, drank, done drugs, vandalized, and is still meticulous about taxes, untempted by other vices, would fall apart and abandon love of Christ instilled from early childhood, risk marriage and reputation and self-esteem, waste money and time, lie to his wife, and be unable to truly repent when it comes to sex. I'm operating on two levels now. On the one hand, I'm a deliberate, rebellious sinner bent on a consuming lust, casting aside all concerns of godliness. But then, I'm a man of God, desperately desiring to do what is right. Do not utterly forsake me. Well, I'm here to testify that my God didn't utterly forsake me, that there is hope. And for that, I'm grateful, and I want to share my strength, hope, and experience with you. Truly, my testimony is, I will praise Thee, O Lord my God, with all my heart, and I will glorify Thy name forevermore. For great is Thy mercy toward me, and Thou hast delivered my soul from the lowest hell. And truly, when I was in the grip of pornography, I felt I was in the lowest hell, and I don't live there anymore. And I thank God for that. But let's look at this issue. Pornography has had a devastating impact on families. The Internet has been documented as a significant factor in divorces 2 out of 3. A lot of that is because of online affairs, people meeting each other online and leaving their original marriages. There's a website that has a tagline, "When monogamy becomes monotony." It is solely there for helping married people find other married people to have sex with. You can see the statistics of how many men are visiting a porn site every month, and 1 out of 6 women, including Christians, are struggling with this issue. Half of your families are saying that that pornography is a problem in their home. The adult industry, the statistics are staggering. The total U.S. revenue, $12.6 billion in 1 year. Now that's a little bit more than I make, so I need to understand what that means. What we found out is that is more than Major League Baseball, plus the National Basketball Association, plus the National Football League, all combined. It's more than what they bring in. That's a big industry. There were almost 1 billion DVD and video adult rentals in the year 2005, just in the United States alone. Almost 1 billion. When you go to a hotel and you have video on demand, more than half of what is requested are adult films. and then 45 million unique visitors every month to adult websites. Now again, I need help quantifying, so I found out that 45 million, if you take my state of Massachusetts, its population, and you multiply it by 7, you're just a little bit under 45 million. That's how many different people are looking at porn sites every month. We kind of feel like the situation with pornography right now is very analogous to what was happening with the tobacco industry years ago. It's an industry that is really committed to hooking children in early, getting clients just addicted to a lifetime of use, just like the tobacco industries have been proven targeting youth. We also feel like there's this thing called secondhand smut. And just as secondhand smoke was inescapable several years ago, I remember when I was a kid, if I was taking the subway, there'd be people smoking on the subway, and there was nothing I could do to avoid it. I was going to breathe in their smoke whether I wanted to or not, even though it was a health hazard. Well, it's similar now with the sexualization of media. It is impossible to avoid seeing sexually stimulating media when you go into a shopping mall or when you watch TV or when you look at a magazine. It is inescapable. You look at the magazines in a supermarket and you got your little child with you and she's saying, "Mommy, what does that word mean?" And those are words you don't want your little girl or little boy learning. But it's there right in your face. It is being sold as cool. I was recently at a debate with one of the male porn stars debating a group called XXX Church, who are a great ministry that is combating porn and really trying to address this issue. And after the debate, there was a reception, and kids at this college stood in line for 2+ hours just to get an autograph from this person. And the adoration that I saw from boys, from men and women alike, was rock star status. Porn is just being seen as a cool thing to do, and porn stars are being admired. So we encourage you to lead by example. Don't let smoking secondhand smut impact those around you, particularly your children. They're learning, they're watching, they're experiencing things based on what you're doing. And we realize that many young people, their first exposure to pornography was something that they found in their parents' stash, or an older brother or an uncle, or some older figure who, instead of protecting, rather set them up. We really urge you not to be guilty of that. I would like to at this time introduce you to a friend of mine. His name is Pete the Porno Puppet. He's also from XXX Church, which I just mentioned, and he has a really, really important message that you need to hear. So go ahead, Pete, tell them what they need to know.
Hi kids, I'm Pete the Porno Puppet, and I'm here today to talk to you about pornography. Listen kids, have you gone into your daddy's closet and found a bunch of magazines with naked mommies in them? Did this make you feel yucky inside? Pete knows pornography is everywhere, on the internet and in your parents' secret locked drawers. So tell your mommy and daddy to say no to pornography, for Pete's sake.
I would imagine that was both humorous and disturbing to watch. But Jesus said it even stronger. He said this, "Whosoever shall offend one of these little ones that believe in me, it is better for him that a millstone were hanged about his neck, and he were cast into the sea." Jesus takes very seriously how we lead and how we teach. So let us not be guilty of leading our younger generation, the younger generation, into this behavior. So what are we talking about? Well, we're talking about sin. And let's get some basic definitions down just so we have a context to understand it. The definition of sin that I'm really loving is this one that I heard from Bart Campolo, my friend. Great definition. Anything at all which diminishes one's capacity to love God and His people. But I want to strengthen that a little bit more. And what I like to do is personalize it. Anything at all which diminishes my capacity to love God and His people. For me, that's very helpful, because that answers questions like, well, is masturbation wrong? My standard answer is, I don't know. It's just wrong for me. You see, I can evaluate rightly whether something diminishes my capacity to love God or His people. I can figure that out most of the time. And once I've figured it out, I know what is right or wrong. I don't know how to do that for you, and I don't need to do that for you. That's your business. You need to figure out what works for you, what doesn't, what allows you to love God completely, allows you to love His people, and what doesn't. I had a friend who was allergic to almonds. I'm talking deathly allergic, like emergency room will he live allergic. Now, almonds, are they sinful? I would say you'd be pressed to say that. But is it sinful for my friend to eat almonds? Absolutely. So it's a real question of what is working for you. And that answers things like masturbation or what kind of movies or how far do I go with my girlfriend or boyfriend. That's how you answer those questions. What are the results in terms of your capacity to love God and His people? You see, we have two basic human desires. The first one is to worship. Every culture, every society, every indigenous culture has created a desire to worship, a being to worship. We call it a God-filled vacuum. That's just endemic in the way humans are made. And secondly, there's a desire to not be alone. God recognized that way back in Genesis, that we have a desire to connect with others. These are just basic human instinct. They're in the ROMs. You can't change anything about them. Every human being is born this way. Pornography, among other things, tries to meet those needs. We worship the images, the act, the anatomy. I mean, why do you think they call them sex goddesses? It's because it's a thing of worship. And we make huge sacrifices of time, of money, of reputation, of relationships, of physical health, of sleep. We do these things in an act of worship. And secondly, pornography creates a virtual connection. It's a fake connection. It's not real, but it's a substitute. And a lot of times we feel like it's easier than the real thing. It's not as demanding. But furthermore, it can often lead to a need to actually consummate that with a face-to-face meeting. So pornography is basically meeting good needs badly. Well, I'm about to talk about victory and how to get there, but I need to give you two very basic concepts first. Freedom versus recovery. One is a position, it's a state of being. Recovery is a process. It's an ongoing experience. So for me, freedom is something that I walk in. I'm in freedom. I'm going through recovery. I stand apart from my addiction from pornography. It's no longer defining me. It's no longer who I am. Yet I am continuing to heal from its impact. In freedom, I can choose. There was a time where a temptation would come and I had no choice but to give in. Now, I still make poor choices, but not as many. Fewer. That's recovery. And then my top struggle is no longer this issue of pornography addiction, but I'm still addressing the root causes, the things that got me here. That's what I'm looking at. So that's freedom versus recovery. So let's talk about recovery, which is the process that is needed. There are 7 phases of recovery that I've kind of come up with that I think will be helpful as you're working with people who are dealing with this or as you yourself are dealing with it, so that you won't be blindsided when you hit these things. And the first phase, I call it simply recognition. It's a research mission. It's trying to discover, okay, just what is this thing that I got here? And so the first thing is to recognize the depth of infestation. When I was first getting healthy, I thought there were a few selective behaviors that needed to be fixed. But as I looked at it, I saw there are lots of little ways that I was feeding lust in me. There are lots of little concessions, whether it was where I sat on a subway train, or what movies I chose to rent, or which ways I went home, or just various little ways that I was intentionally trying to sort of keep my appetite for lust somewhat satisfied. And so in this recognition phase, we find all the different ways that we're dealing with whatever the issue is, whether it's sexual addiction or some other addiction. We find all the ways that we're supporting that desire for that fix. And then the second is we document, or we recognize the true cost of the acting out, of the behavior, of the disease, of what we're doing. And this takes a while when you realize not only the effect on you, but the effect on those you love, and just the effect on society at large. Let me show you what I mean. Recently, I asked my staff, the people I work with at Tech Mission, to document, well, why is pornography bad? And boy, did they have some reasons. And so from a variety of people, I got a lot of different answers. Now, as you're looking at some of these, you may say, oh yeah, I've thought of that, or oh, I never thought of that, or they didn't think of something I thought of. And that's fine. The fact is that there are a lot of reasons, and in the recognition stage, we start recognizing, okay, when I do this, these are some of the things that are put into place that are really negative consequences. In the recognition phase, we come to grips and admit just how badly this is costing us. Now, a phase that is very common is called withdrawal. Perhaps you remember the movie Ray, where they showed Ray Charles fighting the heroin addiction and going cold turkey. Well, with withdrawal from pornography or other addictions, it's very similar. It hurts. It's a very difficult experience, and I love this picture because it really captures the way it feels. One feels like a little baby just longing for comfort and not being able to find it. Some people experience physical pain even, but it is just a very gripping experience, and it is an essential part of healing. One has to just get used to not having their comfort measure. Sometime later you may experience what has been called the pink cloud. This is sort of a phase where you get through the worst of the withdrawal, and you sort of have the second wind of just exhilaration. You feel kind of like, wow, I can really do this. This is great. I should have done this a long time ago. This is easy. This is wonderful. You should do it too. And so it's a real period of just a break. It's kind of a gift to God in the process of recovery. And it's a wonderful thing. But the thing about it is it doesn't last. It's a phase that you go through, and then you have to go through the real gripping, difficult, challenging part of long-term recovery. One other thing that's really important is that especially if you're married, if you're going through this phase of the pink cloud, you may be going through it about the same time that your spouse is coming to grips with exactly what you were doing. And so while you're very excited about what you're not doing, your poor spouse is trying to just cope with recognition of what you were doing all this time and who you weren't, and just trying to really put their world together. So the enthusiasm for this pink cloud may not be shared. It'd be kind of like for a guy, his wife to come home and say, you know, honey, today I didn't let any of the guys at work kiss me. Aren't you proud of me? That would be a very difficult thing for a guy to take. And so we encourage you to share your experience, but be sensitive and be aware that it may not be received positively depending on who you share it with. Sometime later, you may experience what I've called the resentment volcano. And this is a very difficult phase, because what happened is the addiction, whatever it might have been, was designed to keep uncomfortable feelings covered up. It was designed to relieve us from pain. And so that's no longer true. And so all those uncomfortable, unresolved, angry feelings are now fully exposed. The lid is blown off, and there's nothing to keep it from just spewing forth. And this emotional lava just spews forth out of somebody who may have normally been just a very good-natured person. And so they hate everybody. The whole world stinks. Everybody's wrong. And there's just a period where they go through this horribly difficult resentment phase. But the fact is that that's actually a sign of healing. That's actually good news, because that stuff had to come out. It was there. It was already there, and it just needed to be expressed. It needed to be let out and vented out. So this is actually a sign that healing is really happening. But it is very difficult, and people going through this phase are not fun to be with. Somewhere down the road, someone may experience what I call a premature checkout. And this is a very pernicious and dangerous phase. See, what may happen is that the most obvious symptoms that you came in concerned about have gone underground. And so the really bad stuff that you were doing, you're not doing that anymore. And you're really excited about that, and that's really wonderful. But the fact is that fundamentally, the psychic change, the spiritual work that has to happen, the character change has not taken yet. So you're still you, and whatever got you there is still at work and operative. Because recovery takes a long time, and it's more than just simply not doing bad stuff. What I've seen in my program, the 12-step program I'm involved in, I've seen many people have this burst of sobriety, and they're really excited, and then a few months later say, you know, I don't need this anymore, and they leave. And then about 6 months later, they come back with their tail between their legs saying, you know what, I'm back where I started. So I urge you not to rush this process and not to consider yourself cured instantly, because often this can take a long period of time. It took a while to get into, can take a while to get out of. And so that brings you to this phase, which I call commitment to recovery. Here's a phase where you finally recognize, okay, this is not just an event. This is not like getting over a cold. This is a long-term thing that I'm going to have to work on for some period of time. Again, I like this picture, because dude is not just going around the store to buy some candy. He is on a journey. He's out there in the mountains, and he's got a pack, and he's ready to roll. And he's going to pace himself, and he realizes that this is not going to be a quick one. The journey to recovery is not necessarily a quick story. And so we need to really sort of hunker down and just really make the adjustment in our minds. Okay, this is going to take a while. There's one last phase, and this is one that kind of blindsided me. I call this complacency daze. And here's how it works. You're just doing all the stuff that you're supposed to do. You're making the contacts, you've got the accountability partners, all the stuff I'm going to talk about in a few minutes, but you're really not fully engaged with it. You're kind of phoning it in, and you're not really putting your whole heart into it. You're kind of just going through the motions. And what happens is less serious behaviors, minor things, or at least what seems to be minor, start to creep in. You start making little concessions and little compromises, and then new temptations also can come in, things that you never had to face before. And you find yourself not quite sure how to deal with those, and before you know it, you're at risk for full-blown relapse. This thing can blindside one very easily, and so I urge you to stay diligent if you're in the process of recovery, or to encourage someone who is to stay diligent and not to get cocky about it. So those are the 7 phases that I've experienced or that I know about. You may not go through all of these, and these aren't necessarily linear. But I just wanted to warn folks about some of the things that they might encounter on this journey to wholeness. Well, let's move into action. How does this thing happen? How do I break free from this trap? Well, before that, I have to answer a question that's really important. Who's responsible for this freedom? Is it me, or is it Jesus? And the answer is, without question, yes. You see, the way it works is that God has the power, but I have the choice. I have to choose to walk in it. Let's think back to the children of Israel. When they were in the wilderness, they had no capacity to feed themselves. There were no fast food joints. There were no restaurants. There wasn't even vegetation enough for them to make food out of. But every morning, God Almighty from heaven sent something called manna. He provided it. They had no capacity to do that. It was totally God. But every morning, they were responsible for going out and gathering it. They had to go get it. It was a 2-part effort. If God chose not to send the manna, there'd be no manna. If they chose not to get it, they'd go hungry. So it was definitely a 2-tier effort, 2-part effort. And every night, whatever they gathered, they couldn't use the next morning. It would spoil. So every morning, the cycle had to start all over again. It was new every morning, every single day. It was a new game. Well, that's how I look at my sobriety. Every morning I wake up without the capacity in my own strength to do the right thing. I don't have it. It's simple. God grants it to me. In His loving kindness, He gives me the grace to do the right thing today. But I have to ask Him for it. I have to receive it. I have to choose to walk in it. I have to appropriate it for myself. And here's the thing. When I go to bed tonight, I will not be able to store any of that up for tomorrow. I've got to start the same exact cycle when I wake up tomorrow morning. If God chooses to withhold His favor, I am a dead man. But every morning He's been 100% faithful, and I'm growing to be faithful to receive what He gives me every day. Okay. Let's look at one supporting scripture to get us started. And it says this: No temptation has seized you except what is common to man. And God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. But when you are tempted, He will also provide a way out so that you can stand up under it. There is a way of escape. And I'm going to share with you the ways that I have resisted temptation in that hard moment. In that moment where I've got a decision to make, what do I have to do? I'm going to share with you some tips, some practical tools that have really saved my life. Now, I don't know if any of you like Star Trek, but I kind of took some of my paradigms from that wonderful TV series. And so, to start out, there are 4 prime directives. You need to memorize these. You need to really have these in your mind at all times. And the 4 prime directives go like this. The first one is off the fence. Folks, we got to decide, okay, what is right and what is wrong. I gave you a definition of sin a few minutes ago. That needs to be settled. So if you are saying masturbation is something I don't want to do, what that means is masturbation is something that you're saying you don't want to do. Either say it's okay or say it's not okay. When you sit on the fence, you hurt a certain part of your anatomy. Get off the fence. So that's the first prime directive. Having done that, you need to shut the door. You need to close off the entry points. You know, the first thing you do if you're in a car and you turn on the AC is you roll up the windows. Why? Because you don't want the nice cool air to just be blown out in the atmosphere. Well, it's the same thing. If you're struggling to resist a certain temptation, then shut off the entry points. If you're struggling with your television watching, you may have to cut your cable. If you're struggling with internet use, you may have to set some very strong boundaries of what you can do. Find the entry points and shut the door. Now I'm about to share with you some tools and practical tips, but they only work if you actually do them. Just like a television set is not very effective when it's not plugged in, these tools will not actually help you if you don't actually try them. These aren't concepts, these aren't ideas, these aren't theories to talk about. The things that I'm going to share with you, you either do them or you don't do them. And I urge you, actually plug them in. And finally, stay on board. I mentioned that recovery is a journey, it's a process. So if you try one of these things and it doesn't immediately change your life, give it some time. Don't just give it a week or two. Give it 6 months of really seriously, diligently applying this. And then you can say, well, you know what, this didn't work. But we urge you not to just get off the first stop and say it didn't work for me. Stay on board. So your prime directives, off the fence, shut the door, plug it in, stay on board. So, into action. First thing is Resistance Academy. These are structures, groundwork, direction. These are general things that you need to have sort of in place. And I've got several of them. The first is to identify exactly what you want. And again, that's getting back to the off the fence. So what is it that we're trying to do? Let's get it actually named precisely. What is it that we've decided is out of bounds that I don't want to be involved with anymore? We have something we call a Media Sobriety Covenant, and we'd urge you to check it out and to download it. It's available on our website. And to actually sign that and give it to one of your accountability partners. I'll be talking about that in a minute. Something else that's really important is to clear the decks. This is especially if you're involved in ministry or very busy and you're still in a place of really recovering from a full-fledged addiction. An addiction takes a while and a lot of effort and a lot of work to heal from. Everybody I know who's been in serious recovery is tired all the time. And so if you're really very busy and you're trying to heal from a besetting addiction, you're going to have a problem. You're going to have to really make some priority shifts. Nobody would say, I'm too busy for chemotherapy if they had a case of cancer that was life-threatening. You'd make the time. Well, the same thing has to be done here. One's sobriety, one's right standing with God, one's deliverance from oppressive addiction is more important than any kind of ministry one might be involved in or any kind of activity. So clear the decks and make space. Get some support. Get some folks who are smarter than you in this, and get some folks who are kind of peers, people that you can walk with together. But get a crew, get some backup. And then document, why shouldn't I do this? Write down all the reasons why it's a bad idea. You remember that list that I had my coworkers make? Wonderful list of all the reasons not to use porn. Do something like that for whatever if it's pornography or if it's going too far physically with someone you're involved with. Write all the reasons why it's a bad idea, and of course include not just the reasons to yourself but others. And get that thing in a piece of paper and write it down and even memorize it if you can. Folks, we got this thing called a BIF. Now, BIF stands for a built-in forgetter. And it's just something that every human being carries with them all the time. Here's the proof. Friday night you do something so boneheaded that you swear, oh my gosh, I will never ever do that. The consequences are horrible. The amount of sin and guilt, the shame and guilt you feel is just oppressive. And you go to God and say, God, never, ever, 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 ever will I do that again. And you're really sincere about it. By Monday afternoon, you can't remember why it was a bad idea. That's the BIF. We all have that. And so this list is your anti-BIF. On that Monday, you pull this list out, and dag, that thing is in your own handwriting, so you can't say that the person who wrote it didn't know what they were talking about. And there you have, in black and white, or whatever color you used, all the reasons why you shouldn't do what you can't remember was so bad. I urge you to have that. That's a real important tool to keep with you in the early stages of recovery. Study your vulnerability. Learn about it. Get to know how it works. I'm not saying study ways of using it. I'm saying learn the struggles of recovering from this and the things that the impact that this can have on somebody's life, and become really familiar with it. And then start working on your underlying issues. None of us got into a besetting sin without there being some other things that sort of caused or supported that to become a place of vulnerability. So what is going on? What are the things that have sort of set me up to be using this as a way to escape from things that I'm trying to avoid? Here's the Media Sobriety Covenant I mentioned, and it's available for downloading. And by the way, all the links that I'm showing you in this presentation are on the last page of this this PowerPoint. They're available for you, so you don't have to worry about writing them down. They'll be at the end of this, and you can click on those links, whether they're to our website, and get the information you need. But these are the 8 points that we recommend: to have an accountability partner, software, recovery groups, close the entry points, that's back to shutting the door, learning about recovery, I just mentioned, being transparent with your spouse, don't lie. That makes things much worse. And then to end online affairs, any kind of entanglement that you have, and to avoid hiding. Again, keep it open in the light. Having done this, let me share with you what I call routine maintenance. This is where you walk around the ship and you tighten every single bolt, you test every circuit, you make sure that everything is where it should be and that everything is working 100% properly. It's boring. It's not glamorous, and it has to be done. It's essential. And these are the things that are ongoing habits for a new lifestyle. And I'm going to share some of them in detail, but one of them is that I have to admit every single solitary day that I need God. I'm back to that manna thing. God, I need you or else. There is no plan B. And so in that I need to deliberately connect with my God. I need to really recognize that I am in His presence and I am in His watch care. That has to be an intentional connection. There has to be a decision every day about what I'm going to and what I'm not going to do. Here's the deal. If there's something you've been struggling and you start your day and say, well, God, when I get there, I'll figure out what to do, you've got a crapshoot at best. You're really going to be at risk. But if you start the day and say, God, today I am deciding that I am not going to do X, well, when the moment of temptation to X comes, you at least have made up a decision. And if you decide to forsake that, well, you've changed your mind. You've done a 180-degree turn. And that's a lot harder to do than to not make up your mind in the first place. There are some routines of accountability, and I'm going to really lay that out for you in a few minutes. They have to be practiced on a regular basis, whether you need it, when you feel that you need it or not. The gray areas have to be totally disowned. You can't have a fudge factor or a sort of conditional commitments to doing certain things. Get rid of the gray and be very clear on what you can and can't do. Set your boundaries and review them frequently. For me, a boundary is I can't go to Barnes & Nobles or Borders or a regular bookstore just to browse. I can't do that. I can go with somebody. I can go to get a specific book. I can get in and out of there. But I can't just at a lunch hour say, I just want to see what's out there. Because I always wind up in certain sections of the bookstore that I need not be. That's a safeguard. That's a boundary for me. And every year I have what I call a State of the Addict address, where I review, okay, what are the boundaries that have worked? What are the ones that need to be more aggressive? What are some places where maybe I can adjust? And I review that frequently. I do that on a rigorous basis annually and informally as I need it, to make sure that my habits are consistent for what I want to accomplish. Beware of times of internal vulnerability. We got this thing called HALT. It's an acronym that the AA folks have come up with. When we're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, we're more vulnerable. And if you think about the last time you sinned or you slipped, you're probably one of these things, maybe two. So when I'm in a place where that's the case, watch out. Double your effort. Amp it up, because it's going to be more difficult to resist temptation. And by the same token, there are going to be situations in your week that you can look ahead and say, oh, here's a time I'm going to have trouble. Let's say your spouse is going out of town and that has been a traditional place of acting out. Then you need to plan, on Tuesday night I'm going to hang out with so-and-so. On Wednesday I'm going to go to this meeting. And on Thursday, these are the things I'm going to do. And you just plan your thing out so that you don't have those times to be so vulnerable. Anticipate them. And then finally, stay mindful and grateful for past victories. It is really important to stay aware of what God has done for you. That's an essential part of healing. Now, one of the most important things is the concept of accountability partners. And I would advise actually to have several. We have some guidelines that we've suggested that really make sense for choosing and asking the Lord to show you who the people you need to have in your life are. Obviously, we recommend the same gender. And we recommend at least some of your accountability partners be those who are a little further ahead in healing and victory. You need someone who is both wise and able to see through your attempts to hide, but also can keep your confidence so that you can feel safe and being really honest. Some of your accountabilities need to be available for daily check-in or email, by phone or email, and need to have at least some regular meetings face-to-face. You need someone who can be on call for very difficult times, and I'm going to talk about that a little later. And then someone who will ask those very difficult questions. Finally, we're going to mention this too. An accountability partner. If your internet use is your struggle, if that's where you've been having trouble, you need someone who can watch that for you and monitor it. What I'm going to share is my accountability structure. And let me make this very, very, very clear. This is what I do. I'm not telling you that you need to do this, but this is what I have concluded is absolutely essential for me to be able to walk in the way I want to. This is what works for me, and I want to share it with you. First of all, I have some things that I do daily. And I change the names of my friends to protect them. But I've got a friend I'm calling Ron. And I call him every weekday morning. I haven't seen him in about 8 years, but we've been doing this phone call thing for 11 years now. And he asks me some extremely difficult questions and about really what I intend to do today. And we answer them for each other and do a couple other things. So we do this every day. He's my renewal partner. Later, while my coffee is still in front of me, my morning coffee, I connect with Leon and John. And we send each other a certain email, which I'm going to show you. We call it the dailies. And so we send that to each other every weekday. So this is the daily things I do. Then there's some things I do weekly. I've got a sponsor that's sort of a mentor figure in 12-step language. His name is Don. He lives all the way out in Chicago. I've never seen him, but he's been my sponsor for maybe 8 years. And I call him every Thursday night and say, here's where I'm doing. This is the struggles I'm having. This is what's been going on. How do you think I should handle this? And I check in. And it's been an amazing relationship of keeping me accountable. Likewise, I've got a couple of sponsees. I'll call them Tehran and Sean. And they get in contact with me. And the same kind of thing happens for them. Now you may be wondering, Bill, why is that part of your accountability structure? I'll tell you why. Knowing that these guys are going to call me is one of the most important reasons why I want to have something to give them. I don't want them to call me and I'm a mess and I've fallen and I've totally devalued everything that I've said I believe in. I want to be able to give them strength, hope, and experience so that when they call, there's somebody on the other end of the line who can give them a sense of hope and a sense of inspiration. So actually they become a very important part of my accountability, and I'm very grateful for them. And then finally, I'll go into this in more detail. A guy named Juan gets something from the internet about where I've been and what I've been doing, and I'm going to share about that in a few minutes. Monthly, 3 of my best friends, Antoine, Devon, and again John, we meet together and we sit and we share for a couple hours of what's going on in our life. We've called ourselves the mighty men of God, not out of any sense of arrogance, but out of a desire to truly be who God sees us and to inspire each other to really go to where God has brought us, or is wanting to bring us. We know each other's wives, we know each other's kids, we know about each other's jobs. We've walked with each other for more than 10 years, and we really are able to speak directly and intelligently into each other's life and also be led by the Spirit to pray for each other. This has been an important part of my healing and recovery and my continued journeying in recovery. And lastly, I'm involved in a 12-step group, and I do a variety of activities in that context. So that's my accountability structure. Let me share it in more detail. I mentioned that my friend Ron asks me a bunch of questions every weekday morning. We call this the daily renewal. And this is basically a way of, with each other, sort of agreeing on what we're going to try to do today. So there's an admission of our willingness to admit that we need God. We're powerless without Him. A desire for sobriety, whatever that needs to mean. A willingness to do whatever we have to do that, to receive that. Then a recognition of some things about just where we are and how we stand with this whole thing. And then finally, question 6 you see there. Just for today, are you willing? And it's really a decision today to give our whole life, the whole day, to God to be in charge of it. There's an expression I love: management of my life is none of my business. And there's just a sense where, my life is not my own, and I need to really trust my Creator to control my day. We then say what's called the Serenity Prayer, which is just, again, a recognition that we need God to help us discern what to do in all of our steps. And after that, my friend Ron asks me these horrific questions that they're very convicting. Have you done anything in the last 24 hours that you're ashamed of? Or are you planning to? And this may not be lust or sexually related at all. It may be that I lost my temper with my daughter, or I stayed up too late watching the game, or whatever it is, but we each share with each other what that might have been, so that we're clean and that we really are transparent with each other. This is an amazing tool, and it's been really helpful. And then after that, we each exchange a gratitude. Something that today I'm really grateful to God for. And we do that with each other so that we are both mindful that God's on our side and there's a good thing. This is available on our website, as are as I said, are all the other documents that I'll be sharing with you. Here's another document. It's an Excel spreadsheet. We call it the dailies, and I share this with 2 of my friends every weekday. So we email it to each other. It's got 4 quadrants. The gratitudes is really important. Not only do I need to exchange a verbal gratitude with my friend Ron, but I need to actually sit down and think, okay, what did God do for me today? Because His mercies are new every morning. And so I look at things. They may be great, they may be small, but it's just very important for me to be able to document what God has done for me. And then I look at the things that are bothering me, the fears, the anxieties, the places of unrest in my life. And my experience has been that by actually putting them down on paper or on a computer and just seeing them, they lose a lot of their power. When they stay kind of vague and unknown, they have the ability to sort of haunt me. But by putting them down, I have a sense of what they are, and I can give them to God. Up in the upper right-hand corner, we have what we call the practices. This is not exactly a do list. This is the things that are important to me today that I want to try to really see that I take care of. Some of them may actually be action steps. Many of them are more just sort of mindsets or ways that I want to, or priorities that I want to keep in my mind. And then finally, there's the fleas. These are the things that I don't want to do today. These are things that I really feel like are destructive or detrimental to me being all that God has made me to be. And I try to look at what those are today. One is very important, is the lust-based decision. This is a concept of just recognizing that sometimes we may do something that may not in and of itself look wrong, but the reason why we did it was hoping that there'd be some kind of a lust benefit. It might be that I chose to go by that newsstand hoping that I'd be able to see something on a cover, or that I went home a certain way hoping that something would be on the corner, or just choices that are made that may in and of themselves seem innocent, but they're really based on a lust desire. I need to flee those at all costs. So again, this is available, and there's 3 things that I really like about this process. The first thing is that it helps me be aware of myself. The thing I love about it is by doing this, I know what's going on with Bill. I know what the things are that are bothering me. I know what God has done in my life. I know the things that are important. That's critical, because self-awareness is key. The second is that others become aware of what's going on. And so my life is being transparent. It's being put in a place where others can see what's going on with Bill, and that I'm walking in transparency and accountability. And then thirdly, I'm aware of other people. And so I'm not so self-centered anymore, because I'm thinking about my friends and what they're going through. And I may even comment on some of the things that I saw in their dailies and be just involved in walking in fellowship with them. So that's a triple winner for me. I've been doing this for many, many years, and it's just been a real blessing. It takes me about 5-10 minutes at the most, and it's part of my morning coffee ritual. Now, I mentioned accountability software. And this is a program that runs on a computer, and it basically records everywhere you go on the internet. It doesn't stop you from going somewhere bad. It just is a big, fat tattletale. And I've got it running right now on my computer. And it is so airtight that I can't even deactivate it without it sending an email to my accountability partner saying, at such and such a time on such and such a date, Bill Mooney McCoy deactivated Covenant Eyes. That's the name of the program I use. So it's been a very powerful tool. I receive the trail of where Juan has been. He receives where I've been. And we say the filters are for children. They really are not ready and old enough to make decisions. They shouldn't have to fight this and resist that temptation. But for adults, we need to grow and we need to mature. And so accountability software is a really good way of having the freedom to really do what you need to do without feeling like you don't have a safety net of accountability. Let me show you how it looks. So the program I use is Covenant Eyes, and it's $7 a month. There's discount pricing for multiple groups, and it sends, as I said, it sends a list to the people that I've asked it to send a list to. Here's what it would look like in a given week. You'd see the week that it was going to send the activity for, and then it lists all the sites that were kind of questionable, and actually rates them by the likelihood of them being questionable. So Playboy.com would probably be somewhere in the 100 range. And then it goes through the daily logs and red flags, anything that is shaky. So you see that on that day, there was one place that it thought that might be a questionable site. And it gives a sense of what someone was doing so that I could see, on a given day, I could see a cluster of red, and I know that Thursday was when my friend had a problem. Another accountability software product is called X3 Watch. And this is again from our folks at XXX Church. They do some amazing work, and it is free. So this is another program that is we just recommend you have one of these two programs or an accountability software package running on your computer if internet pornography has been at all a struggle for you. Now, there are some groups that already exist, some structures that already exist, if you want to just become involved in something that's already there and not have to create something for yourself. The 12-step model is a very powerful tool. It's what God used in my life for a lot of the healing and learning that I've done. On our website, we have a list of all the S groups, all the groups that deal with sexual addiction and pornography addiction. Living Waters is a wonderful ministry that comes out of Desert Streams. It's a discipleship program that really brings the life issues that sort of lead us into places of bondage and brings them to the foot of the cross before our Lord Jesus Christ. They deal with things like struggling with homosexuality or child abuse or just sexual addiction or parental issues or whatever the underlying scaffolding that didn't happen as your childhood was raising up a human being. And look at how that's affected you in terms of your present life and how Jesus can heal the things that needed to be healed then, how He can heal them now and bring us to a place of restoration. There are 2 online groups that I love. Setting Captives Free is an amazing program. It's basically an online Bible study around whatever the addictive behavior may be. They've got one for lust and sex and porn addiction. They've got one for alcohol, for gambling, for all kinds of things. And they match you up with a mentor who will actually look at your answers and respond every so often and give you some feedback and help you on your way. I found it a very powerful tool for me pretty far into my recovery. I needed something new, and this was really just what God wanted for me. And Christians in Recovery is an amazing website. They've got tons of resources on anything that's got to do with healing from compulsive and sexual and struggling behaviors. And it's kind of like a MySpace for Christians who want to get healthy. And so we just recommend that you take some time and look at some of the resources. It's also a community, so you can get to know other people who are really walking and learning and growing in Christ. Some other groups that if you want to actually create a group that's led by a leader, Strength in Numbers by the folks at Blazing Grace. That's available for download on his website, and I believe it's also in our manual. We have a recovery manual that's available in that as well, and that's free. And then Saddleback's church, Rick Warren's church, they have something called Celebrate Recovery, and there's a kit that's available from them that you can purchase on their website. These are both groups that are led by a leader that could be useful in recovery and healing. Or if you wanted to look at more of a peer support group, kind of like the 12 steps. First of all, get your pastor's buy-in with it first, and then we recommend that you meet weekly or bi-weekly and read one of the books that I'm going to mention in a minute. We've got some ground rules there that are kind of to keep it a safe place and to make sure that people have equal access to participation. Here are some of the books we recommend. Every Man's Battle, Men's Secret Wars, and At the Altar of Sexual Idolatry. These are all excellent books. If you go to our website under Resources, Books, you can click right there and order them. Again, wonderful tools, and we recommend that if you were to do your own group, that you take one of these books and read through it together as a group. Okay, that's routine maintenance, and that's a lot. But let's move to Code Red. You know, back in the Star Trek thing, when an enemy ship was approaching and they were not there to socialize, they would do what they call red alert. And an alarm would sound and people would be at battle stations and they'd be ready. We got to do the same thing. When temptation is real strong or when we know that we're in a place of real vulnerability, we need to move to Code Red. This is where you just pull out all the stops. And the first thing is you got to know you're in trouble. You don't minimize it. If you feel like you're in trouble, you're in trouble. And just acknowledge that. And then when you've done that, you need to cry out to God. God, I need you. I'm in trouble. Just look at how David wrote the Psalms. He wasn't playing when he called out for help. He was very passionate about, God, I need you to deliver me now. We can't do it alone, and so we need to sound the alarm. One of the things that the mighty men of God, the guys that I meet with on a regular basis, one of the habits we've developed is that when one of us is in a time of extraordinary stress, we immediately send out to each other an email that says so-and-so in trouble. And we're in the habit now of responding to that quickly, first in prayer, and then if the Lord leads us in advice or calling or whatever the Lord leads us, and so that the person who sent that alarm knows that he's covered by his brothers. Here's the rule. If you think you need help, you need help. If you don't think you need help, you need help. It's much better to have a false alarm anyways than it is to fail to send an alarm and wind up hurting yourself. And here's where we kind of have to look at ourselves, really honestly. I don't know about you, but there have been times where, especially if it was the midnight hour, really late at night, and I was very tempted, I heard myself say, well, I just don't want to disturb anybody. I don't want to bother them. And that's really actually a false sense of arrogance, because we would not resent it if our friend did that to us. In fact, we'd probably be honored that they thought of us and asked us to help them, and be just more than glad to try to walk them through this difficult time. And yet we're too arrogant to think that our friend would like the same opportunity and loves us just the same. So we need to not be arrogant and recognize that when we reach out to someone, we're giving that person a gift to be used by God. And we should not deprive our friends of that blessing, and we should just allow ourselves to recognize our friends care about us like we care about our friends. So don't be arrogant. Call. If it's urgent, call, no matter what time it is. Do something positive. Anything. Go outside and pick up the trash on the street in front of where you are. Just do something. And then choose to stop at all levels. Whatever you can do, just get out of there. I'm talking about pulling a Joseph. When he was being propositioned by Potiphar's wife, he didn't discuss it, think about it, or look at his options. He booked, he ran, he bounced, he was out of there. When you can, get out. If you're having trouble watching good TV, get out of the place where the TV is. If there's a certain person at a gathering that is making you go crazy, walk away. Get out of there. Just do whatever you have to do. Run if you have to. Don't be polite about it. Just get out. Something really important to me is raising my Ebenezer. An Ebenezer is a stone of remembrance. It's recognizing and remembering what God has done in the past and being grateful. Gratitude is real key for resisting temptation. This was not intuitive, but I learned this in my 12-step work. You see, when I'm really pressed with a hard temptation, I do something called stop, drop, and give me 10. And what I do is I'll stop right there, and I will name 10 things that I'm grateful for. Right where I am, I'll say, thank you, Jesus, for this. God, I want to thank you for that. Thanks for so much for this. And this really is a blessing. Thank you so much. And I find out if I get through 10 of those, my desire to sin is seriously compromised. In fact, my ability to enjoy lust has been almost ruined. Because it's very hard to say, thank you, Jesus, and deliberately turn your back on Him at the same time. So my experience has been that this is a very powerful tool. Look for what's going on underneath. You know, is it because I bounced a check, or because I have an unresolved issue that I need to work out with my child? What's bothering me? Because that may have been the cause for the strong temptation. And one of those things may be loose connections. Is there a relationship that's been frayed or damaged? Just like a stereo will have static if a speaker wire is kind of loose. When we have relationships that are kind of off, then it really puts us in a place where we're just not working the way we should. And that can be a place of real temptation. Finally, afterwards. And this is whether you're successful or not, there's what we call damage control. Again, Star Trek, they always would do this after a battle. Let's see where we are, and let's see what we can learn. So the first thing is, if we fall, is to really give it to God and say, God, I did. And it's important to look not just exactly what I did, but where the place of decision was, where I sort of started to move away from God. Where the place of compromise or ambivalence was. Having done that, I need to know and experience God fully. That includes sorrow, wrath, and love. And I need to know that God goes through all of those in response to my sin, and there needs to be a place of real grief. James talks about really grieving over your sin. Having done that, I need to accept God's forgiveness. Having asked Him for it, I need to know that He gives it. I mean, how many times have I sinned and done something really bad and asked God to forgive me, and then 5 minutes later, 10 minutes later, 1 day later, asked Him to forgive me again? Frankly, that's kind of blasphemy, because God said, I forgave you, and He wants to move on. So really the problem is that I haven't forgiven myself. I need to give myself the same grace that God has given me, and really allow myself to be forgiven, to know forgiveness, and to move on. Here's something that's kind of hard, but it's really, really important. I need to let somebody know about it right away. I need to disclose quickly. I can't let it sit in the grass and sort of take root. We have an expression, we're as sick as our secrets. And I've learned that the things I don't tell are the things that can really hurt me the most. My vulnerability is highest when no one else knows about it. So I got to tell somebody quickly. And then look at the underlying needs. Again, what was going on? What really was needed? Let's look and see what needed to happen. Empty hidden bottles. Alcoholics talk about keeping a bottle stashed in some obscure part of the house that no one will find, just in case. Well, do I have a just in case? Do I have something I'm trying to still get away with that I haven't really fully surrendered? I need to empty that and need to put that out in the light and give that up. And then trace back. Okay, where was the place where I stopped really walking in transparency and honesty and in wholeness. And you will often find that it wasn't at the moment of temptation, but was several minutes or maybe hours before that. Find that place and look at that. And then learn from your mistakes. Learn. Maybe you need to redraw boundaries. Okay, maybe I can't see those kind of movies. Or maybe we can't be alone together after a certain time. Or maybe I just can't talk to this person anymore. Whatever it is, learn from it. Don't be stupid. Just get smarter from it. And then finally get back in the game. You know, it hurts when we mess up. And it's easy to get discouraged and say, oh, I quit. But we can't do that. We've got to get right back and try again. So there you got it. Probably more tools than you ever dreamed you could get. But these are the ones that have worked for me. And maybe you'll come up with some others that work for you too. But I really challenge you to just take a look at some of these and see which ones God's putting in your heart to say, yeah, that's the one I want you to do. Now let me give you an incredibly important warning. Please listen to this. Don't try all these at once. Don't try to implement all of these tools at the same time. You will explode, and I will not be held liable for that. Try one or two, maybe one from each group, or a couple things here and there, and try them for a few weeks until they become habits, until they're kind of things you're used to, and then you might say, okay, well, let me try this too. And then shore up your lifestyle with the things that are working for you. But don't try to implement them all at the same time, because it's just too much. Bottom line, there's two essentials that we need. We need good orderly direction. This is the how-to. And I believe, with God's help, I've given that to you in this talk. I've given you some very tangible, concrete things that you can do. But there's also something we need. It's called the gift of desperation. We so much need to want to. We just really have to have a place of, I don't care what it takes. This is kind of the by any means necessary that Malcolm X talked about in terms of black liberation. I needed to adapt that same militant passion and commitment to getting well. I could not try a nonviolent approach because this disease, this type of struggle does not go out gently. So for me, by any means necessary means several things. It means that when I travel alone, which is not often, and I'm at a hotel room, I have the TV removed before I even check in. I call before I arrive at the place and I say I'd like the TV removed from my room before I get there. And so that way I don't spend every night tormented by will I or won't I, and trying not to do something wrong and struggling. It's not there, I have no choice. That's been a tremendous gift. And so by any means necessary means whatever I have to do, that's what I do. Here's the bottom line. It's all about God. He's the one source that makes these things possible. It's only Him who can do it, and God, He's able, He's willing, and He's ready if we are. So really the question is, are we ready to get on this? Are we ready for a lifestyle of recovery, of healing, of wholeness? Or do we need to go back out there and do more research and get beaten up a little bit more? As I was preparing for these talks, I looked at one of my old journals, and the last entry of one of them says something to the effect of this. I would never have guessed that 14 years ago, my looking at Playboy and Penthouse would lead me to a place like this. God help me to warn my brothers. Well, my brothers and my sisters, I've warned you. I've shared with you what I've learned, and I pray that it is a gift and a blessing to you as you walk in wholeness and really look to see God's full supply of liberation and freedom for you. God bless you in Christ's name. Amen.